5. The Arctic's nuclear legacy. The Arctic Ocean is home to a hidden threat. Dozens of decaying nuclear submarines that were dumped by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. These underwater relics pose a serious risk of radioactive contamination to the marine environment and human health. According to a report by the Norwegian Radiation Protection Authority, the Soviet Union disposed of 18 nuclear reactors and 6 entire submarines in the Kara Sea, the Barents Sea, and the Sea of Japan between 1965 and 1988. Some of these reactors still contain highly enriched uranium fuel, which could leak into the seawater due to corrosion, damage, or sabotage. The report estimates that the total amount of radioactivity in the sunken submarines is about 1 million curies, or a quarter of what was released in the first month following the Fukushima disaster. The consequences of such a leak could be devastating for the Arctic ecosystem, which is already vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The radioactive material could spread through the ocean currents and the food chain, affecting fish, marine mammals, seabirds, and humans. The contamination could also disrupt the fishing and oil industries, which are vital for the economies of the Arctic countries. Moreover, the sunken submarines could become a source of nuclear proliferation, as terrorists or rogue states could try to salvage the nuclear material for weapons. To prevent these scenarios, Russia has launched an initiative to lift some of the most dangerous nuclear submarines from the seabed, with the support of the international community. In March 2020, President Vladimir Putin signed a decree to remove 2 Soviet nuclear submarines and 4 reactor compartments by 2030, reducing the amount of radioactive material in the Arctic Ocean by 90%. The first submarine to be retrieved is K278, which sank in 2003 while being towed to a decommissioning site, killing 9 crew members in the process. The operation is expected to cost about $330 million and involve a complex engineering feat. The removal of the sunken submarines isn't only a technical challenge, but also a moral duty. It's a way of honoring the memory of the sailors who lost their lives in the service of their country, and of respecting the rights of the Arctic inhabitants, who depend on the ocean for their livelihood and culture. It's also a gesture of environmental responsibility and international cooperation, as the Arctic is a shared heritage that requires joint efforts to preserve and protect. However, the initiative faces many obstacles and uncertainties. The exact location and condition of some of the submarines are unknown, and the harsh weather and ice conditions in the Arctic make the operations difficult and risky. The technology and equipment needed for retrieval are also costly and scarce, and the legal and financial responsibilities are unclear. Furthermore, the initiative doesn't cover all the nuclear waste that the Soviet Union dumped in the Arctic, such as containers of solid and liquid radioactive waste, reactor compartments from icebreakers, and even an entire nuclear-powered icebreaker called Lenin. Therefore, more efforts and resources are needed to address the problem of abandoned Russian nuclear submarines and other nuclear waste in the Arctic. The international community should support and monitor Russia's initiative, and also urge the country to be more transparent and accountable about its nuclear activities in the region. The Arctic countries should also cooperate to establish a comprehensive and binding legal framework for the prevention and management of nuclear accidents and pollution in the Arctic. The Arctic is a fragile and valuable ecosystem that deserves to be protected from the legacy of the Cold War and the challenges of the present and future. 4. The R-14. The R-14 Chusovaya was a single-stage intermediate-range ballistic missile that was developed by the Soviet Union in the late 1950s and early 1960s. It was given the NATO reporting name SS-5 Scheme and was known by the Grau Index 8K65. It was designed by Mikhail Yangel, and it was named Chusovaya after a river in Russia. The R-14 was a successor to the R-12 Dvina, another Soviet IRBM that was deployed in Cuba during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. The R-14 had a longer range, a larger warhead, and a more accurate guidance system than the R-12. It could carry a thermonuclear weapon with a yield of 1 to 2.3 megatons, which was equivalent to millions of tons of TNT. The R-14 could strike targets up to 2,800 miles away, covering most of Europe and parts of Asia. The R-14 was launched from either surface pads, silos, or mobile launchers. The mobile launchers were mounted on trucks that could move around and hide in forests or fields. This made the R-14 more survivable and flexible than fixed-site missiles. The R-14 was also designed to be transportable by air, with each component fitting into a C-130 cargo plane. This enabled the Soviet Union to deploy the R-14 to remote locations, such as Cuba or Greenland. The R-14 was a major threat to the security and stability of the world during the Cold War. It was part of the Soviet nuclear arsenal that aimed to deter or destroy the Western Allies, especially the United States and NATO. The R-14 was also involved in several crises and incidents that could have triggered a nuclear war. For example, in 1963, a Soviet R-14 exploded on the launch pad in Kazakhstan, killing 7 people and spreading radioactive contamination. In 1966, a Soviet R-14 was accidentally launched from a silo in Ukraine, but luckily it was destroyed in midair by a self-destruct mechanism. And in 1976, a Soviet R-14 was detected by a US spy satellite being prepared for launch in Latvia, causing a false alarm and a high alert. The R-14 was gradually phased out by the Soviet Union in the late 1970s and early 1980s as newer and more advanced missiles replaced it. The R-14 was also limited by the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces (INF) Treaty, which banned all ground-launched missiles with ranges between 310 and 3,420 miles. The R-14 was then officially retired in 1984 after serving for more than 2 decades. The R-14 Chusovaya was a powerful and dangerous nuclear weapon that shaped the history and politics of the Cold War. It was a symbol of the Soviet Union's military and technological prowess, as well as the nuclear arms race and the brinkmanship that characterized the era. The R-14 was also a relic of a bygone age, as many of its former launch sites and facilities are now abandoned and decaying. The R-14 was a nuclear threat that's no longer active, but still has a lasting impact on the world. 3. HMS Dreadnut. HMS Dreadnut was the first nuclear-powered submarine of the United Kingdom. It was launched in 1960 and it served for 20 years, being decommissioned in 1980. It was named after the revolutionary battleship of 1906, which had established a new standard for naval warfare. Similarly, Dreadnought represented a significant advancement in submarine technology, as it was the first to combine a nuclear reactor with a streamlined hull and a single propeller. The nuclear reactor of Dreadnought gave it several advantages over conventional diesel-electric submarines. It could operate underwater for long periods without surfacing or refueling, and it could achieve higher speeds and greater endurance. It also had a reduced noise signature, making it harder to detect by enemy sonar. Dreadnought was armed with 6 21-inch torpedo tubes and could carry up to 18 torpedoes or missiles. Dreadnought was built by Vickers Armstrong at Barrow in Furness, with the assistance of the United States under the 1958 US-UK Mutual Defense Agreement. The reactor was supplied by the US, while the rest of the submarine was designed and constructed by the UK. Dreadnought was launched by Queen Elizabeth II on October 21, 1960, and it was commissioned into the Royal Navy on April 17, 1963. Dreadnought had a long and dignified service career, participating in various exercises and operations around the globe. HMS Dreadnought was the lead boat of her class and served as a prototype for the Royal Navy's nuclear-powered submarines. It played a key role in the development and testing of nuclear propulsion technology. And like other submarines in the Royal Navy, Dreadnought would have been involved in strategic deterrence patrols during the Cold War. These patrols were aimed at providing a continuous at-sea presence to deter potential adversaries. Submarines like HMS Dreadnought contributed to national defense by providing a stealthy and mobile platform for surveillance, intelligence gathering, and potential strike capabilities. But due to machinery damage and the limited refit facilities that were available at the time for nuclear fleet submarines, Dreadnought was withdrawn from service in 1980. It was the first of its kind to be decommissioned, and the disposal of its radioactive materials posed a challenge for the UK. HMS Dreadnought is now at Rosyth Dockyard, laid up in a float storage until it can be safely dismantled under the Submarine Dismantling Project (SDP). Dreadnought is a historic vessel, as it marked the beginning of the UK's nuclear submarine fleet, which now consists of 11 submarines, including 4 armed with nuclear missiles. 2. The K278 Gomlet. The K278 Gomlet was a Project 685 Plavnik nuclear-powered attack submarine of the Soviet Navy, also known by its NATO reporting name of Mike class. It was the only submarine of its design class, and it was capable of carrying a mix of torpedoes and cruise missiles with conventional or nuclear warheads. It was also the first submarine to reach a depth of 3,346 feet in 1984, setting a record at the time. The Gomlet was built by Sevmash and Severodvinsk after an order was issued in 1966 for the construction of the submarine. It was then finally completed in 1974, and it was laid down on April 22, 1978. The reactor was supplied by the US, while the rest of the submarine was designed and constructed by the Soviet Union. The Gomlet was launched on June 3, 1983, and it was officially commissioned on December 28, 1983. Gomlet had a lengthy and distinguished service career, participating in various operations and exercises around the world. As the lead boat of her class, she showcased advanced technologies, including a titanium hull for increasing diving depths, as made evident by her record-breaking dive in 1984. However, the Gomlet met its tragic fate on April 7, 1989, during their third operational patrol in the Arctic Ocean. A fire broke out in the engine room, quickly spreading and causing the submarine's nuclear reactor to shut down. The crew managed to carry out an emergency ascent and surface within 11 minutes, but the fire continued to rage and the submarine lost power and control. Many of the crew members perished before rescue, leaving 42 total dead. The Gomlet sank in the Norwegian Sea, about 186 miles southwest of Norway's Bear Island, at a depth of 5,528 feet. It still lies there today, with its nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear-armed Skval torpedoes on board. The submarine poses a potential environmental and security risk, as its radioactive materials could leak or be accessed by unauthorized parties. Some efforts have been made to monitor or salvage the submarine, but the challenges are significant. The Gomlet is a historic vessel, as it marked the advancement of submarine technology and the courage of its crew. Its grim fate is also a reminder of the dangers and costs of nuclear warfare and the need for international cooperation and transparency in dealing with such issues. 1. The USS Thresher. The USS Thresher, SSN 593, was the first of the Permit-class nuclear-powered attack submarines, and the second submarine of the US Navy to be named after the Thresher shark. It was launched in July 1960 and was commissioned on August 3, 1961. It was equipped with 4 21-inch torpedo tubes and could carry up to 6 torpedoes or missiles, including the new anti-submarine missile Subrock. Thresher had a nuclear reactor that gave it unlimited range and endurance, as well as high speed and stealth. It was designed to perform various missions such as anti-submarine warfare, intelligence gathering, special operations, and nuclear deterrence. It also played a role in the Cold War. Off Charleston, South Carolina, the USS Thresher supported Subrock anti-submarine missile development. It briefly returned to New England waters, then proceeded to Florida for additional Subrock tests. While moored at Port Canaveral, a tug accidentally struck the submarine, damaging a ballast tank. Repairs at Groton, Connecticut were then conducted by the Electric Boat Company. Thresher underwent further tests off Key West, Florida, before entering Portsmouth Shipyard on July 16, 1962, for a scheduled 6-month post-shakedown availability. Due to being a first-of-class boat, the work extended to nearly 9 months, and after that, the ship was recertified and undocked on April 8, 1963. However, the Thresher met its tragic fate on April 10, 1963, during deep diving tests about 220 miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The day before, the USS Thresher, under Lieutenant Commander John Wesley Harvey, commenced post-overhaul dive trials. After an initial trim dive test, Thresher surfaced and performed a second dive to half of her 1,300-foot test depth. Then, during subsequent deep dive trials, garbled communications with the rescue ship Skylark indicated difficulties. As Thresher neared her test depth, the final message included the number 900, and then all communication ceased. 15 Navy ships were dispatched for search and rescue, and by evening, the submarine was declared missing. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral George W. Anderson Jr. announced the loss, and President John F. Kennedy ordered flags flown at half-staff from April 12th to 15th in honor of the 129 lost submariners and shipyard personnel. On June 25, 1964, USS Thresher was found on the seafloor at a depth of 8,400 feet. It was broken into 5 sections, and the wreckage was photographed in August of that same year. The exact location of the ship, however, is unclear. That's it for today's video on the fascinating and mysterious world of abandoned nuclear submarines. We hope you learned something new and enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button and share this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!